Hi, folks. Welcome to Tuesday's I Write Radio videocast podcast. We've got Peter A. Bell with us today, Jimmy Hutton, Stuart Lockhead, myself, Norrie Stewart. But we've invited Peter along because he's got a new Facebook group going, White Rose Rising. Those of you that don't know, the White Rose is the emblem of the independence movement from past days, I think it would be fair to say. But we'd like an explanation really about what the aims of it are, Peter. Is it a Plan B platform, or are you looking to change the mindset of the yes movement?
I've never quite gone along with this whole idea of a Plan B. I actually wrote something on my blog about that today. I mean, I like the way Angus MacNeil and Chris McElhenney think, but and I think we'll probably be talking about them later on. But contended that if you're making a Plan B, you're planning for failure. So what we need is not a Plan B, but a Plan A that actually works. And that is what we have not had up until now. I mean, nobody can pretend that we've had a Plan A which works. Plan A being Nicola Sturgeon's gold standard, the Section 30 process. Now, I've had plenty to say on that subject in the past. The section, I don't have to say anything. If it's not obvious now to everybody, the Section 30 process simply cannot work. And it must be walking about with their heads up on their sides. It did not work. It cannot work. It will not work. So we need a new Plan A. If that process isn't going to work, we need another process. And any process that involves Westminster is going to fail. So we need a process that cuts Westminster out of the picture completely. And that's kind of what, related to this, we also need a campaign that changes direction, a reframed campaign. Again, this is something that's been spoken about. The White Rose Rising kind of brings these two things together. The campaign, henceforth, has to focus on ending the Union rather than making a case for independence. We've been making a case for independence. How long now? If we only count the modern phase of the independence campaign, dating from, say, 2011, that's nearly a decade we've been making it. There's a thing in the National today, Ian Black from Voice of Scotland, Scottish Independence Convention, about a new case for independence. How many new cases? Which one of these cases do we try and sell to the electorate? No, you'll never get a new case. You'll never get a case for independence that the whole yes movement agrees on. And if the whole yes movement won't agree on it, it's unlikely that all the voters won't agree on it, or even a majority of them. So, no. What we need to be doing is campaigning against the Union. So White Rose Rising is a campaign against the Union, and it's focused entirely on that.
Would it be fair to summarise as no longer why independence, but what you're looking for is a position that asks why the Union?
Precisely. Yep, got it in one, Norrie. Yep, that's it. Totally focused on the Union. Anybody comes to that site and starts talking about, say, or housing or education or anything else, I'll just shut them up. Don't want to know. Want to know and only about the process, this process that we put in place of the Section 30 process. Because the other thing about this is that in order to get the SNP to go the way that it has to go, the yes movement is the only thing, the only force in Scotland that actually has the strength to do that, to push the SNP in the right direction, but only if we speak with one voice. At the moment, the yes movement is this diffuse It can't be called a campaign. It's a movement. As a movement, it's great. As a campaign, it's a total failure. It doesn't work as a campaign. Campaign has to be focused. It has to be tightly focused on an achievable objective, and it has to be disciplined. And that's a dirty word in the Yes movement. But if we want to have a campaign, that's what we need. We need to bring the Yes movement together. We need to unify it in order to have a powerful enough voice to speak directly to the SNP and the Scottish Government and the Scottish Parliament. Notice Westminster does not get a mention in all that. Westminster has nothing to do with it. Westminster is not going to do anything for us. So shouting away Boris Johnson and Westminster and Hancock and Gove and all the rest of them, total waste of time. Absolutely nothing to do with it. They are doing nothing for us. The only people who can do anything for us are our elected representatives and our government and our parliament. And in order to do that, they need the strength of the Yes movement added to the political power of the SNP. You know, the old lever analogy.
Yeah.
Okay, questions?
Well, look, it boils down to one simple issue, so I think I know what the answer is going to be. If you are going to invite the movement onto a campaign, it's got to be done on a very, very simple manifesto. What do you mean by a manifesto? I would imagine a constitution is too big, too much.
A constitution. Sorry, sir. Constitution is a different thing.
Peter, we've lost you.
Oh, there we go.
There we are, you're back.
The internet connection went, possibly because my wife is using it as well.
Carry on.
Sorry, where was I?
Manifesto.
Yes. Well, we can't just go to the SNP and say, you've got to do something. We have to get them to commit to something fairly specific. Up until now, I've spoken only of bold, decisive action. We need to clarify that a bit and narrow it down a bit. At some point, there's got to be a confrontation with the Westminster government, the British government. There's no way to independence without that because they are determined to stop it. So you can't avoid confrontation, which is what Nicola Sturgeon has been trying to do. You can't avoid it. So you choose the ground on which you're going to have that confrontation. And I suspect it will be something to do with the competence of the Scottish Parliament. And I suspect it will be to do with a referendum. We must draw up a manifesto which, when adopted by the SNP, means that they are going to assert and affirm the exclusive competence of the Scottish Parliament in this area, in the area of the referendum. Only the Scottish Parliament has the authority, because only the Scottish Parliament has the democratic legitimacy. Now, that's what breaks the logjam. Once you've done that, once you've challenged the British state once and succeeded, then that's it. The whole of the rest of it collapses. Because once you've established the sovereignty of the Scottish people and the competence of the Scottish Parliament, there's nothing left for them to challenge. It's a done deal. So, after that, it's only a matter of time before the rest collapses.
So, in practical terms, you're looking to force the SNP to adopt.
I would prefer to say persuade, but yes, force.
Okay, leverage the SNP to adopt a policy in their manifesto for the next Holyrood elections, which we will have a referendum. Not in their manifesto. They can have their own manifesto.
They can have in it whatever they please. I talked about this separating out the independence issue from all the policy issue. So a totally separate manifesto for independence. And one that anybody can adopt, because I would be looking for the Greens and the SFP to adopt this manifesto for independence as well. But it's obviously it's essential that the SNP adopt it.
Jimmy?
Yeah, well, I think there may be some minds within the SNP that think along the same lines. When you look at the referendum legislation that they ran through Holyrood, was it last year? And I do worry when you see the likes of, there was an article, I think it was a Scotsman this morning, where an unnamed source close to the top of the SNP, which basically means whoever, I'm not sure the unnamed source actually exists. I think the writer might have just made them up to make the article.
Well, it's Ewan McComb, so that's perfectly possible. But I did read on Twitter, sorry Jimmy, I did read on Twitter Jonathan Shaffy's comment on Ewan McComb's article detailing this information that he got from a supposed source. And Jonathan Shaffy's response is spot on. Yeah. If that is the thinking in the SNP, then arses need to be kicked. Arses need to be kicked very hard.
Jimmy, do you want to give us a gist of it? As I remember, it was something about the EU and a definite Section 30 being the only way.
Yeah, it was basically throwing up hurdles that people need to jump through and being quite dismissive about ideas that are coming out of the Yes movement. It was very high-handed, the attitude that the source took.
Sorry.
It'd be interesting. Clearly, they've done that because they're not putting their head above the parapet to identify themselves or actually evince an argument.
We're talking Ewan McComb, also known as Brian Spanner. It's a deliberate spanner in the works.
Well, possibly, mate. I think there's we have people within the SNP that chuck spanners in the works anyway, mate. Witness the Gender Recognition Act and the Hate Crime Bill. But I do think this one is a bit dodgy.
The problem with what Stuart's saying there is, it is Ewan McComb, and it's the British media, it's the Scotsman. I'm not about to trust it 100%. But the real issue here is not what was supposedly said, but how easily people believe it. And that is the big problem, because people will believe that. And if the SNP has got itself into a situation where people actually believe that that is the attitude of the leadership, then the SNP has a real problem. Yeah. Evidently, it doesn't have an electoral problem, but it sure as hell has a problem as far as the independence movement is concerned. And again, we have to see these as two separate issues. The SNP is doing a great job as a government. Nicola Sturgeon's doing a great job, terrific job as First Minister. But they totally fall down on the constitutional issue.
Yeah, and Peter, when you can be so easily dismissed by such a ludicrous figure as Theresa May by just saying now is not the time, and that dismissed the entire Section 30 argument. And at that point, Theresa May had no power. You know, she had no parliamentary power, and she could still just swat us away. So you're right.
I do think when the time comes, because it won't come until next year now, that we ask for another Section 30, which I think they will do. And if Johnson answers with a black and white no, that's an advantage. What we do after that, I'm kind of coming round to thinking that the only way to change the dynamics of this is to start asking, as Peter is suggesting, what will the union do for us, as opposed to what will independence do?
Well, but that's a campaigning. That would be a campaigning strategy.
Well, that's what we're talking about, isn't it?
Well, I still want to ask Peter one thing that is not yet clear, and I think he's already made clear many times in writing, which was the Yes campaign would have to agree on one key aspect of their strategy that would go in the manifesto. And you've said yourself, Peter, the only thing you can see everybody agreeing on is dissolve the union.
Well, that's right. So that's what everybody. That is the one thing that everybody in the Yes movement has in common. We all want to dissolve the union because there is no independence without dissolving the union. That's the thing that we have in common. So that is the thing that we focus on. That's the thing that we become unified on. And we leave all the policy out of it because there will be no policies, no policy questions on the referendum ballot. There will be no question about what colour you want postage stamps to be. There will be no policy issues at all. There will be nothing on the ballot about currency or any of the rest of it. No decisions will be made about that. The ballot will have one choice and one choice only, and that is the choice between Scotland and the British state. We know what both of these look like. We don't have to be told what they look like. We have enough experience in both. So it's not that hard a choice to make.
Well, look, is there any alternative? Is there any alternative to dissolve the union? Is there anything else we could possibly agree on?
No.
I don't see it.
No, there isn't.
Yeah.
I'm just trying it out. I'm not saying that.
I get where you're coming from, but no, there isn't. You cannot build a single issue campaign around a disputed issue.
Yeah.
And independence is a disputed issue. You ask 100 people in the Yes movement what independence means, you'll get 103 different answers. Maybe 105 on a different day. So we're never going to build a campaign around that. We can only build a campaign around the very core of the independence campaign, and that is getting out of the union, breaking the union, dissolving the union, however you want to put it, ending it, because the union is the problem. Everything stems from the union. People complain about what the Tories are doing to Scotland. People complain about the Tories are doing to people, but they're only doing that because of the union. If there was no union, we would not have the Tory plague that we have. It's the union that visits that on us.
Well, Peter, you said earlier about what does the union do for us. I would put the point, what does the union do to us if we don't dissolve the union? Because I didn't really go along with the theory that Johnson would try and shut Holyrood and just try and shut down the Scottish independence movement altogether. But judging by what is now acceptable from behaviour from a Westminster government, where you can lie, cheat, just do whatever you like, and the absolute rife corruption that is going on right now with handing out contracts to family and friends, I wouldn't be surprised if they tried to close Holyrood down, to shut the debate down completely.
I'll tell you the only reason they haven't done it, or the main reason they haven't done it, it's not necessary. So long as that government that we've got there in Edinburgh, so long as they're in power with their approach to the independence campaign, Boris and his regime are sitting down there in London saying, it's not going to be a problem. They're never going to challenge us. Why bother? Why stir things up? We could just plod away like this. Even if they're saying to themselves, even if the SNP win massively in the next Holyrood election, even if they take over 50% of both votes, both ballots, massive majority of seats, even if they do something impossible, even if they took every single seat on 100% of the vote, on 100% turnout, the British state would still say no. The British state cannot let Scotland go. It's fundamental to what the British state is. So to imagine that the British state is ever going to cooperate willingly and honestly with a process involves Scotland leaving the Union is a total nonsense.
Peter, do you think that senior figures in the SNP are actually being dishonest now by telling us that the British state will cooperate and that there is a path? Do you think they're actually being dishonest?
If they come right out and say that, then they are being dishonest. Because I cannot see how any intelligent person can possibly hold that opinion. Mind you, Alan Smith is supposedly intelligent, and he's no long done. Sorry, I seem to be. Have I gone again?
We can hear you. We can hear you.
Yeah, right, okay. Alan Smith is supposedly an intelligent person, and he's not long done telling us that we've never been closer to independence. That just, you know, so are they being dishonest, disingenuous, stupid? Who knows? Are they just being politicians?
I think
suspect the latter.
One of my bugbears, one of my fears about the SNP was always that the point would come when the ambitious politician would join the SNP for the best chance of being elected to a cushy number. That quote out of the Scotsman today, I would suggest comes out of the mouth of one of these type of people. They didn't go there to get independence. They went there to be a professional politician.
Yeah, and there's plenty of them, mate. You can see that with some of the spads around, some of the actions. The fact that they've no in any way shut down this absolute nonsense. In fact, they're encouraging things around GRA and hate crime bill and that. You know, this is stuff that, I'm sorry, out with the wokerati bubble in Holyrood, nobody's interested. So why it's become such a big spanner in the works, for want of a better thing, is beyond me. Nobody's interested in it. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter to the SNP is Scotland's constitutional future, and they're not even marking time. I mean, that article by Wings was brilliant, talking about these huge surges in support from 50.5% to 51%, and that's a cracking bit of work.
Pierre.
It's brilliant, but I mean, it's his usual, Stu Campbell's usual excellent forensic analysis, and it really states what has happened. However, at some point, we're going to have to get away from constantly stating what has happened and complaining about it and whining about it, and start thinking about what's going to happen. You know, the next election campaign is upon us. The referendum campaign has never really stopped. The independence campaign certainly hasn't stopped. So we've got to stop whining. Half a dozen times on social media today, I had people come on, what's the point in giving them another mandate? Do you know how many mandates they've already had? No, I don't know. Why don't you tell me? Because I, of course, never pay any attention to Scottish politics. They're just repeating the same thing over and over again. We already gave them mandates. But we already gave them. Shut up. It's time to start talking about the future, about where we take the campaign next. We can't go back and fix all that stuff. Absolutely no doubt. Stu Campbell is perfectly right. The SNP as a party, and the blame goes on the leadership that comes with the job. There have been a catalogue of missteps and misjudgments and misdeeds over the past 5 or 6 years, but none of that alters the fact that the SNP is still crucial to the independence campaign. So what is the point in going on about it? We know all of that. How do we change it? We change it by getting the yes movement, and that includes SNP members, by the way. When I say yes movement, I'm talking about SNP members like myself. We get the whole yes movement to speak with one voice so that it can speak directly to the SNP not through all these organisations that are set up as buffers between the people and the party. Organisations like SIC, no, directly to the party. We need people from the Yes movement that can sit down in a room with Nicola Sturgeon or Keith Brown or whoever and talk directly to them about the SNP and the Scottish Government's approach to the constitutional issue. That has to be changed.
Stuart.
Agreed.
Yes, I think, well, now is possibly time to ask Peter here, well, what do you feel about Angus, Brendan McNeill and Chris McElhenney's plan to force this idea onto the onto this conference floor, so that the next year's Holyrood election will actually be a referendum on independence?
I'm dubious about it. I welcome it. I welcome it, if for no other reason than that at least Angus and Chris are kicking against the traces. At least they want to open up the discussion. I was there when they tried to get things going at the last conference. I actually I think I was first on the stage, and I was making a point about how the motions had been excluded from the conference. It was a point of order, and it was a point of order, incidentally, that was never dealt with. So I think officially the conference never happened. But I won't trouble too much about that. They're doing great work in that regard, and we should be grateful that there are people with influential voices within the SNP who are prepared to stand up and be counted. There are others, and I won't mention any names in this context, there are others who sort of half stand up, ready to sit back down again if a certain person looks at them. But it's Angus and Chris who really leading this. However, their plan B just doesn't work. An election cannot substitute for a referendum. They're two entirely different things. You cannot have a single issue election. It's quite impossible, because you would have, in order to have a single issue election, you'd need to get all the other parties involved in the election to agree that it was a single issue. All our opponents would have to do, and if I was strategizing for them instead of the idiots that they've got, then a different idiot, then I would say to them, just ignore the independence issue altogether, ignore the constitutional issue altogether, talk about every other issue you can think of, every other devolved issue that you can think of, leave independence out of it. And then, after the election, when the SNP try to say, oh, that was a referendum on the Constitution, they turn around and say, well, it was never even discussed. Well, they would get their pals in the media to go along with that. They would go on these TV debates, and the BBC would ask no questions about independence, no questions about the Constitution at all. It would be excluded. So you see how easy it is to prevent it being a single issue thing. Also, I'm sorry if I'm talking rather too much here, but I've got a lot to say. The other thing about Angus and Chris is, as far as I can understand it, it still depends on the Section 30. They're still talking about if Boris Johnson continues to refuse the Section 30. Why are we not rejecting that completely? To even request a section, and this is coming back to what you said a wee while ago, Norrie, to even request a Section 30 is to compromise the sovereignty of the Scottish people. So we shouldn't even be asking for one. I campaigned hard to stop Nicola Sturgeon asking for it again. I got laughed at. She asked, and she got treated like shit. So when Nicola Sturgeon is treated like shit, Scotland is treated like shit. I'm treated like shit. So no, cut the Section 30 process out of it completely. It is the gold standard. It's their gold standard. It's the British state's gold standard. It is there so that they can maintain the pretense of democracy, the pretense of a route out of the Union. But it is not. It's devised by them so that it will not work. It cannot work.
Peter, because somebody did comment on Twitter today that one good thing one issue that was realised out of the Edinburgh Agreement was it wasn't just that the Section 30 was a gold standard. The British government agreed they would recognise an independent Scotland following the result of a referendum.
And there you have it, Stuart. Alex Salmond is not a stupid man. This will not be news to you. And so people say to me, if the Section 30 is as bad as you make out, why did Alex Salmond go for it? Alex Salmond knew that the Edinburgh Agreement, or some kind of agreement like that, what was important about that was the very recognition that you talk about, the recognition of Scotland's right of self-determination. Now, they will say that the Edinburgh Agreement was time limited, but you cannot switch that on and off. They have recognised Scotland's right of self-government. Alex Salmond realised that it was worth compromising in order to get that. They now cannot turn around and say that Scotland doesn't have the right of self-determination. When they say no to a second referendum, they know what they're doing. They know that they are denying our democratic rights. They know that they're being anti-democratic. They don't care because they're British and they can do whatever they like. We have to kick against that. There's no way to go along with them and end up where we want to be. If we go along with them, we'll end up where they take us.
It's just dawned on me that I've always kind of had a position where I thought we should treat Westminster a bit like Brussels, and we should simply renegotiate the Treaty of Union. The upshot being that we would never get what we wanted, so we would just scrap the treaty and become an independent nation. And you're kind of just cutting out the negotiating stage with your idea of simply getting rid of the Union.
There's no purpose to be served in negotiating. For a start, they won't enter into negotiations. And for a second, it's like the argument about federalism. I will accept, for the sake of argument, I will accept that it is possible to create a federal United Kingdom. For the sake of argument, I will accept that. The only problem there is that it can only work. You can only get a federal settlement that is satisfactory and acceptable to the people of Scotland if it is negotiated from a position of independence. If it's negotiated between free and equal partners, free and equal parties, I should say. So independence has to come first. If Gordon Brown and all these other irrelevancies want a federal solution, then that's what they have to do. They have to support independence, because only then will we be in a position to negotiate a federal settlement. We won't, obviously.
A federal settlement, which nobody seems to think about, would put Scotland on a par with Yorkshire. We'd cease to become a country and become a region.
Yeah,
so we would give up our sovereignty. And none of the unionists arguing ever mention that.
It's their way of pretending that they're offering a viable solution. It isn't viable. You never hear them answer any questions on it. You never hear them being asked any awkward questions on it. You never hear, for example, the point being put to them, as I have just put, about how it could only be negotiated between equal partners, equal parties. Sorry. So that question is never put to them. No awkward questions are ever put to them.
Yeah.
So forget federalism.
Jimmy.
Aye, well, it's a nonsense. I was just wondering, given the huge overreaction for the right-wing press in England to a statue in Bristol getting hoisted in the harbour, do you think we should maybe start a wee campaign of direct action and have Queen Victoria off the front of the National Gallery?
It's very tempting. I have no problem with direct action, with civil disobedience. I have very few political heroes, and they're all dead. Sorry, Nicola. But Gandhi is one of them. Gandhi was a brilliant strategist. People will say he made mistakes, but who doesn't, for goodness sake? But I don't think we're at that point yet. We still have this possibility of getting the SNP and thereby the Scottish Government going in the right direction. That is still a possibility. If that isn't a possibility, then I'm in favour of direct action of some kind. It would be direct action against the Scottish Government. It would be direct action against them for failing to do what we require of them.
Well, I do worry about their fear, mate. They're probably electorally got more support than they'll ever get right now. And they've got, I mean, like you say, when we see pictures of 100,000 people with saltires marching down the Royal Mile, the roar from that crowd should be shaking the SNP in their boots. If they don't act now, they lose that support. And if that support turns against them, they're finished.
The reason they're not shaking in their boots is because they know that the Yes movement can't touch them, because the Yes movement isn't unified. It can't touch them. We have strength. We have strength in numbers. They have power. But it's not until we bring that strength and that power together that we get somewhere. They know we can't touch them. If somehow, and I admit, I don't even know if it's possible. This White Rose Rising thing is sort of an attempt, an experiment, to see if there's even the hope of it happening. I have to say, I'm not massively encouraged by some of the reaction that I've had. But it's an experiment. If that's not possible, then we have nothing. If it is possible, then you will see the SNP shaking in their boots. If we get to a situation where the Yes movement has somehow come together as a federation and appointed a panel of 3, 4, or 5 spokespersons who speak for the entire Yes movement only on the subject of the Constitution, only on the matter of ending the Union, how it's done, the process that is followed, that and nothing else. When that happens, the SNP will be quaking in their boots. Trust me on that.
Are you not possibly making an argument, and I'm pretty sure you don't support the idea, but making an argument for an independence list party?
No.
Would that not achieve the same?
No, because list parties will necessarily be in competition with the SNP, and that goes against precisely what we need to do. We need the effective political power of the SNP, and we need that effect. As Jimmy was talking about the power, how can the SNP have so much power and be so afraid? We need to give it even more power. We need to give it so much power that it can't possibly turn around and say, "Oh, we can't do this, we can't do that." Say, look what we've given you. We've given you 70 seats, for goodness sake. Get on with it. But we should be saying that to them before the election.
Yeah, I'd agree. They need to hear it now. They need to be hearing it before they sit down to work out what's going in their manifesto. And they need to be hearing it so that if we do put them in Holyrood with a big majority, they're not going to go down this gradual. Because, I mean, the gradualism doesn't work when you're actually not moving anywhere. You can't call what they've been doing the last few years gradualist. They've been standing still.
It doesn't
we
work
go
when
backwards.
you're in power. It
No,
doesn't work when you're in power. You need to actually do something with the power.
absolutely. Absolutely.
And that's the problem at the moment. They're not doing what is required.
We're doing that again. We're doing it again, Norrie. We're talking about the problem, not the solution.
Well, that brings us quite neatly back to the White Rose Rising.
I'm a professional.
Excuse me. What you're looking for here is ideas, I take it, to be thrown up by White Rose.
Input, certainly, yeah. Mostly ideas about this manifesto for independence. I contemplated, I've actually started drafting it myself. I didn't want to present it as a fait accompli because then it would have been mine. And I wanted it to belong to everybody. I would like some suggestions. I've not quite got around to asking for that yet. Only started this yesterday. Input on this manifesto for independence. It is the most important thing. Apart from getting the Yes movement to act as one. You're getting this manifesto for independence that we can push on the SNP, on the pro-independence parties.
So it's a single policy manifesto. Get rid of the union.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I was just going to say, why not have you come out with? Here's the question: we have decided that the only thing we can't possibly agree on is dissolve the union. Do you want to be part of this? Yes or no?
Well, that's more or less what we're saying to them. The problem there is an issue here because again, it's back to the power that they have. With the power that they have and the way the polls are looking at the moment, it could change, but the way the polls are looking at the moment, they could call a bluff. They could turn around and say, well, we're just not going to do it. What are you going to do about it? Are you going to stop voting for us? Which obviously we can't do. We can hold out a threat for the future. We can say to them, right, this is your last chance. If you mess it up this time, if you do not go along with this, 4 years' time, and they're thinking 5 years' time, and they're thinking that far ahead, for a political party, they're thinking that far ahead. Next election, you're done. Because we will not only not be campaigning with you and for you, we will be campaigning against you. Because in that 4 years, we will establish another party to do the job that you have failed to do. And if the entire Yes movement says that, what choice have they got?
Yeah, there's also it's a very genuine threat because if there was another party, if they fail to use the power, if there was another party, can you imagine how gleefully the British press would start to announce that the SNP are under 100,000 members? The SNP have lost 40,000 members, and you know yourself. Once you start going down as a party, it's a struggle to bounce back up.
Unfortunately, now we've got the kind of the opposite of the problem that I was talking about before, where we were looking at things that had happened in the past. Now we're looking at hypothetical things that might happen in the future. Again, let's focus on the moment. This has to be. I mean, I'm some daft old cow, a cantankerous old white prick. Sitting in my living room with a webcam, spouting it. Obviously, this threat to the SNP, this ultimatum, has to be done politically. And we have people in the movement who can do this, who can put that across effectively.
we've all had conversations when we've been at marches or been at meetings and that. There are brilliant minds out there within the Yes movement. What we need to do is get the brilliant minds sitting in a room and coming up with a few ideas.
I've got most of them here today.
I wouldn't say that, mate, no.
I'm presuming that was a reference to the grumpy old white pricks.
Cantankerous. It's got to be cantankerous.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't work with count if it's not cantankerous. I'm too good for this.
I think you've done very well today with Peter, without a doubt, because if you only started this public face of White Rose Rising yesterday, and here you are already, had about 45 minutes of explaining very lucidly what you mean by it. That's a pretty good start for what, to be honest, what would be called a meme.
Yeah.
Aye.
To be fair, it is a very simple idea.
That's the beauty.
That's actually a bit of a problem, because there are a lot of people out there who actually think restoring Scotland's independence, if it's not a complicated process, it can't be real. If you tell them it's just as simple as the Scottish Parliament passing a motion, passing a resolution dissolving the Union, I'm not saying that is exactly what would happen, but if you say to them it can be as simple as that, they won't believe you. They say, oh no, there's got to be the court cases, and there's got to be votes, and Westminster's got to agree, and there's got to be a vote in the British Parliament. They'll say, oh, there's got to be all this complicated stuff. It can't be real if it's not complicated. The thing is, it isn't complicated. We are part of a political union that we supposedly joined voluntarily, so we decide to leave that union. What could be simpler than that?
I can think of somebody who would like to ask his opinion of it. Ask him to look at what Peter, listen to what Peter just said. It would be Elliot Pulmer.
Oh, Elliot, I'm kind of expecting to hear from him any day. I do get a wee bit of input from Elliot once in a while. I always welcome it.
Yesterday he was writing about how different, it must have been some island in the South Pacific got its independence, and how they were quite happy to run up the British flag every time a strange ships hove into the bay in case they were coming to rape and pillage.
He's
got a lot of experience of that process.
Absolutely, he is a leading expert on constitutional matters. I think, I can't possibly speak for him, but I suspect, I'm putting it more strongly, I suspect he would agree that every single case is unique. People talk about precedents and the laws and conventions that govern them, but there is no set procedure, because every single instance is different. People refer to the situation between Spain and Catalonia, Madrid and Barcelona. It's totally irrelevant, because this situation is totally different.
Well, that's what I'm trying to say, Peter. But what I'm trying to say is, I'm not thinking about getting Elliot to draw up another constitution for Scotland. He's already done that anyway. I'm just saying, along the way, he's also got a lot of experience of watching different countries get their independence and how that has actually happened.
Absolutely, experience is valuable, and I'm sure he's got interesting things to say about the kind of ideas that I've been putting forward, especially this, what I'm saying about it being absolutely impossible to get to independence without confrontation with the British state, and the idea that the democratic process within the British state, which will allow Scotland to get out of the British state, is just nonsensical. The British state doesn't work that way. The people who've broken out of the British state's influence have done just that. They've broken out. They've got out despite what the British state does. So for us to imagine that Scotland is somehow different, it's not. I made the point. I made the point a wee while back in an article. If there isn't a process by which we can withdraw our consent to the union as readily as that consent was given, then it cannot be genuine consent. And if it is not genuine consent, then Scotland didn't join a political union in 1707. Scotland was annexed. Scotland is an annexed territory of England. Now, if you think about it that way, you don't ask yourself whether you want to be Scotland to be independent. Ask yourself whether you want Scotland to be an annexed territory of the British state. And while you're about it, just take a wee look around you and see what that implies. See what happens when you're an annexed territory of the British state. See how you get treated. See how your elected representatives get treated. See how your parliament gets treated, the people you actually do elect. There are different ways of thinking about this, and from what I can make out, not one of those ways has ever entered the heads of anybody in the SNP leadership.
I think your point should be taken on board by everybody, that it should be as easy to get out as it was to get in.
Yes.
I think that's a very good point.
Wasn't a lot of money, by the way. The bribe.
Well, I can think of at least 4 guys that would be prepared to be bribed by Westminster to take Scotland out of the Union if they're up for giving us some money.
Well, there's an interesting topic that I wasn't going to ask, but I will ask you now, Peter. Now, obviously, we have an elite in Scotland. I couldn't, but I'm not going to. Would it make any difference if we found there was quite a coterie of the elite that would really come out in public and support an independent Scotland? And I'm not talking famous film stars or anything like that. I'm talking about the real elite, like the bankers and the lawyers.
It couldn't do any harm. It couldn't do any harm, but it's not going to happen. You might get them. We did get some who were supportive of independence to some extent in the 2014 referendum. There were a few industrialist bankers, business owners, business people. I almost said businessmen. Oh, dead man. But they were talking about the way it was being done, the Section 30 process, the very deferential approach to the British government, the British Parliament. Please may we, oh, thank you very much. Yes, we will be sure to do it this way. No, we won't upset anybody. So long as we were doing it that way, I don't think you're going to get anybody in the Scottish elite, as you put it, the establishment. You'll get very few that will go along with the idea, the sort of things that I'm talking about, getting away from the Section 30 process and setting up our own process, making our own process. I doubt if very many will, because they'll start throwing in that word illegal, as if the exercise of a people's right of self-determination could ever be illegal. It can't possibly be illegal. It's an inalienable right. It cannot be illegal to exercise it. It can be done undemocratically. That is possible. So long as we ensure that the process is democratic, it cannot be illegal. It's not possible.
I think on that note, guys, because we're coming up for an hour, call it a day. Interesting, Peter. Just to let everybody know, Facebook, White Rose Rising is Peter's new portal for interesting ideas. So thank you for coming on, Peter. Jimmy Hutton, Stuart Lockhead, I'm Norrie Stewart. Thanks for listening, folks.